Most Americans assume the word rapture appears directly in their Bibles. It doesn't. So where did this idea actually come from? Today, I'm separating text from tradition. I'll show you what the key Bible passages actually say, how the modern rapture concept was born in the 19th century, and why prophecy charts became part of American religious culture. By the end, you'll know how to distinguish between what's written in Scripture and what's layered on top through interpretation. Let me start with the text itself. 3 passages show up in almost every conversation about the rapture. 1 Thessalonians 4:15 through 17, Matthew 24:29 through 31, and 1 Corinthians 15:51 through 52. Here's what they actually describe. 1 Thessalonians talks about believers being caught up to meet the Lord in the air. Matthew 24 describes the Son of Man coming with a loud trumpet call and angels gathering the elect. 1 Corinthians speaks of a mystery, believers being transformed in the twinkling of an eye at the last trumpet. Notice what's missing. None of these passages use rapture as a technical term. They describe resurrection, a meeting with Christ, and transformation. The word rapture comes from the Latin rapere, meaning to seize or catch up, which appears in the Latin Vulgate translation of 1 Thessalonians. But the question isn't whether these events are described, it's how they fit into a timeline, and whether that timeline appears in the text or comes from somewhere else. Popular readings often assume a specific sequence. Believers disappear, then 7 years of tribulation, then Christ returns. But when you look at these verses without that framework, they simply describe a future event where the living and the dead meet Christ. The chronology, the gaps, the 7-year period, those come from interpretation, not from the verses themselves. That brings us to where the modern idea came from. The rapture, as a distinct event happening before a 7-year tribulation period, became popular in the 19th century through the work of John Nelson Darby, an Anglo-Irish preacher and founder of the Plymouth Brethren movement. Darby developed something called dispensationalism, a way of reading the Bible that divides history into different eras or dispensations, each with its own rules and purposes. In his system, the church age ends with the rapture, followed by a final 7-year tribulation for Israel, and then Christ's return to establish his kingdom. This wasn't the mainstream Christian view for most of church history. It was a relatively new interpretive framework. The real turning point for American audiences came in 1909 with the Scofield Reference Bible. Cyrus Scofield published a Bible with extensive footnotes that explained dispensationalist theology right alongside the biblical text. For many readers, those notes became as authoritative as Scripture itself. Study Bibles are incredibly helpful tools, but it's important to remember that notes are interpretation, not revelation. Scofield's Bible sold millions of copies and became standard in Bible colleges and seminaries across America. By the mid-20th century, this reading had moved from the margins to the mainstream, especially in evangelical and fundamentalist circles. Radio preachers, television evangelists, and eventually films picked up the concept and spread it even wider. Now here's the question. Why did this particular idea take off so powerfully in the United States? Several factors came together. First, America's revival culture loved dramatic, vivid preaching, and the rapture offered a compelling narrative. Second, the publishing industry discovered that prophecy books sold. Hal Lindsey's The Late Great Planet Earth became one of the best-selling nonfiction books of the 1970s. Third, prophecy charts became a staple of American evangelicalism. Pastors would unfold giant timelines showing dispensations, the rapture, the tribulation, and the millennium. These visual aids made complex theology feel accessible and urgent. Fourth, major historical events like World War I, World War II, the founding of Israel in 1948, and the Cold War all seemed to fit into end-times scenarios. When current events appear to match your prophetic map, that map feels validated. And finally, popular culture amplified the concept. The Left Behind series of novels sold over 60 million copies. Movies, songs, and even video games explored rapture themes. What began as a 19th century theological proposal became a dominant part of American religious imagination. It's important to note that this isn't about dismissing anyone's faith. It's about recognizing that a specific interpretive system with identifiable historical roots shaped how millions of people read certain Bible passages. But there's more than one way to put this puzzle together. Christians who take the Bible seriously hold different views on the rapture's timing. The pre-tribulation view says believers are raptured before the 7-year tribulation begins. The advantage is that it offers believers escape from suffering. The challenge is that it requires reading gaps into passages that don't explicitly mention them. The mid-tribulation view places the rapture halfway through the 7 years, often tied to specific events described in Revelation. It attempts to balance imminence with prophetic detail, but it also requires precise sequencing that not everyone sees in the text. The post-tribulation view says believers go through the tribulation and are gathered to Christ at his visible return. The advantage is that it aligns the rapture with the second coming described in Matthew 24. The challenge is that it asks believers to prepare for persecution, not escape. Faithful Christians exist in all three camps. Some hold amillennial or postmillennial views that don't include a secret rapture at all. The point of this video isn't to settle the debate, it's to help you understand where each reading comes from and why different frameworks lead to different conclusions. Let me close with a few common pitfalls to avoid. First, rapture is not a universal biblical technical term. It's a theological label applied to certain passages. Second, study Bible notes are not the same as the biblical text. They're helpful guides, but they represent someone's interpretation. Third, the passages we've discussed do speak about Christ's coming, resurrection, and gathering of believers. What's interpreted is the chronology, the sequence, and the gaps between events. When someone says the Bible clearly teaches a pre-tribulation rapture, the more accurate statement is this: some texts can be read that way within a larger interpretive system, and that system itself has a history. Now you know how to separate text, tradition, and culture. This framework helps you read Scripture with more calm and less hype. You can engage conversations about the end times without assuming one modern interpretation is the only biblical option. So here's my question for you. Which passage do you want me to break down in detail next? 1 Thessalonians 4 or Matthew 24? Drop a comment with 1TS4 or MT24, and I'll know what to tackle. One more thing before you go. In the next episode, I'm putting 1 Thessalonians 4 under the microscope, word by word, and I'll show you why two different translations can lead to two completely different chronologies. If you think translation doesn't matter, you're about to see exactly how much it does.